What happens when Benedict Cumberbatch walks onto a live daytime panel expecting a thoughtful conversation about public pressure, celebrity responsibility, and the nonstop noise of modern media, only for the discussion to suddenly shift into something much more personal? And what happens when a tense exchange with Alyssa Farah Griffin slowly changes the entire mood of the studio? Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The audience cheers as Benedict settles into his seat, smiling politely, adjusting slightly as the applause stretches longer than expected. "Well," one host says with a grin, "you definitely woke everybody up this morning." The audience laughs. Benedict smiles modestly. "I'm glad to be of service." Another host leans in. "You've been everywhere lately. Interviews, press appearances, advocacy work, your acting projects. Do you ever stop moving?" He chuckles softly. "Occasionally. I attempt sleep." Laughter breaks across the panel. "You say that like it's optional," another host jokes. "Sometimes it feels optional," Benedict replies, smiling. The opening starts comfortably. Relaxed. Familiar. The kind of daytime conversation viewers expect. Easy banter. Casual laughs. One host brings up how audiences often see actors as larger-than-life figures. "You've played these incredibly intelligent, powerful characters," she says. "People project things onto you." Benedict nods. "Yes, and I think that's normal. You spend years embodying people who seem confident or in control, and audiences sometimes imagine that extends to your actual personality." "So you're saying you're not secretly solving global crises between interviews?" Someone jokes. "Sadly not," he laughs. "I can barely organize my own schedule." The audience laughs again. Then the conversation turns slightly more serious. A host asks, "Do celebrities have too much pressure now? Because it feels like everybody expects public figures to comment on everything." Benedict pauses for a second. "That's complicated," he says carefully. "I think visibility comes with responsibility, certainly. But there's also an expectation that every person in public life must immediately become an expert on every subject, and I think people can overestimate what entertainers are equipped to contribute." The room grows quieter. "So you think celebrities should stay out of politics?" Alyssa asks quickly. The shift is subtle but noticeable. Benedict turns toward her politely. "No, I didn't say that." "Well," Alyssa says, smiling slightly, "that sounded close." Audience murmurs ripple softly. Benedict stays calm. "I think people should speak when they have something meaningful to say. But there's pressure to respond instantly now. That's different." A host nods slowly. "That's fair." But Alyssa jumps back in. "See, I always find this conversation interesting because celebrities sometimes want the platform when it helps their causes, but suddenly become uncomfortable with criticism when people disagree." The room changes temperature just enough for viewers to notice. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just tighter. Benedict nods once. "That can absolutely happen. So where's the accountability?" Alyssa asks. A couple audience members murmur. Another host lightly interrupts. "Oh, we're getting into it early." Laughter softens the tension. But Alyssa continues. "I'm serious, though. Public figures influence millions. If someone uses their fame to weigh in politically or culturally, shouldn't they expect stronger pushback?" Benedict crosses one leg calmly. "Of course." He says it plainly. Public criticism comes with visibility. Alyssa leans forward slightly. "But then why do some celebrities act shocked when audiences disagree?" Benedict smiles politely. "I think you're speaking about a category of people rather than an individual." Audience laughter breaks out. A few claps follow. Alyssa laughs too, though the smile tightens slightly. "Fair enough." One host grins. "Okay, Benedict," diplomatic answer. He chuckles. "No, genuinely. I think it depends on the person." The conversation continues, but now viewers can feel a little edge underneath. Another host asks, "Do you feel misunderstood publicly?" Benedict pauses. "Yes, occasionally." "How?" "Well," he says carefully, "people tend to flatten complicated conversations into headlines." A few audience members clap softly. He continues, "You can spend 20 minutes trying to articulate uncertainty, nuance, contradiction, and suddenly online the takeaway becomes one sentence you never really meant." A host nods. "That's true." But Alyssa jumps in again. "Though sometimes public figures hide behind nuance when they don't want to answer clearly." The audience reacts immediately. "Oh!" A few nervous laughs. Benedict glances toward her. Still calm. Still measured. "Well," he says slowly. Nuance isn't avoidance. The room quiets. Sometimes nuance is simply honesty. A short silence lands. Not hostile, but noticeable. A few audience members clap. One host gives an amused look toward the crowd. Oh, they like that. Benedict smiles awkwardly. No, I just mean real life is complicated. Alyssa nods, though she doesn't fully back away. But people watching at home also want clarity. Certainly, Benedict says. And clarity matters. He pauses. But oversimplification can be dangerous. The audience quiets again. He continues. If the expectation becomes that every issue has a 10-second answer with complete certainty, we stop listening to each other. One host nods immediately. That's actually really interesting. Another host adds, because television does that sometimes. Audience laughter. Alyssa smiles. Oh wow, are we blaming us now? Big laughs. Benedict laughs too. No. I'm sitting here willingly. The mood softens briefly. Then Alyssa circles back. But let me push you a little. Audience reaction. Because I feel like actors sometimes speak with enormous confidence about problems regular people experience differently. A small pause. What do you mean? Benedict asks. I mean, she says wealth, privilege, celebrity. That changes perspective. Yet audiences get lectures from people who live very different lives. A few audience murmurs. Some clapping. Others visibly quiet. The tension feels more real now. Not loud. Not explosive. But grounded. Benedict nods once. That criticism can be fair. The audience seems surprised. A host raises her eyebrows. Oh, he continues. Absolutely. Fame creates distance. Alyssa nods like she's landed a point. But, he pauses. It doesn't erase someone's humanity. Silence. You can disagree with someone's perspective, he says calmly, without assuming they're incapable of empathy. A few louder claps. Alyssa folds her hands. But empathy doesn't always equal understanding. No, Benedict says immediately. It doesn't. That answer briefly disarms the room. Another host jumps in. Okay, now this is becoming an actual conversation. Audience laughs. Benedict smiles. I hope so. Alyssa presses again. But isn't there frustration when celebrities seem disconnected? There can be, Benedict replies. And audiences are entitled to that feeling. He pauses again. But I think something troubling happens when disagreement becomes dismissal. The room quiets. What do you mean? A host asks. He shifts slightly. When people stop arguing ideas and begin arguing whether someone deserves to speak at all. A few audience members clap. Alyssa leans forward. But criticism isn't censorship. No, Benedict says calmly. Not remotely. The audience quiets again. He continues carefully. But there's a difference between criticism and assuming someone's motives without listening. Alyssa raises an eyebrow. So are you saying people misunderstand you? A beat. Benedict exhales lightly. I think everyone is misunderstood eventually. Audience laughter. One host smiles. That is the safest answer ever. Big laughs. But Alyssa isn't finished. You're very good at redirecting. The audience reacts. A little louder this time. Some nervous chuckles. Benedict smiles politely. I'm British. Huge audience laughter. Even Alyssa laughs despite herself. One host wipes at her eyes dramatically. Okay, that was good. The tension breaks for a moment. But only briefly. Alyssa sits back, then says more quietly. I guess what I'm asking is whether public figures sometimes underestimate how frustrated ordinary people are. The audience settles. The question lands differently. More serious. More grounded. Benedict nods slowly. Yes. No hesitation. The room stills. Yes, he repeats. And I think failing to listen is dangerous. Alyssa looks surprised. But I also think anger deserves curiosity, not performance. A host tilts her head. What does that mean? It means, Benedict says carefully, people often speak at each other now instead of with each other. He glances across the panel. And television sometimes rewards conflict more than understanding. The audience gives a mixed reaction, laughter, applause, knowing murmurs. One host points jokingly. You really came on our show to expose us. Laughter. Benedict laughs too. No, I'm participating in it. Alyssa gives a small smile. But you are dodging a little. Audience gasps and laughs. Benedict pauses. Then smiles. Or perhaps, he says evenly, I'm answering the question you're actually asking instead of the one designed to become a headline. The audience erupts. Applause. Gasps. Hosts glance at each other. Alyssa blinks once, half smiling. Oh wow. One host leans back. And there it is. The audience keeps reacting as Benedict sits calmly, hands folded, expression polite. The conversation suddenly feeling far more serious than anyone expected when the segment first began. The applause lingers longer than anyone expects. Not explosive. More surprised than loud. The kind of audience reaction that happens when a moment feels sharper than daytime television usually allows. One host laughs nervously and gestures toward Benedict. Okay, she says, smiling. I feel like everybody just sat up a little straighter. The audience laughs. Alyssa lets out a short breath through a smile. Listen, she says, lifting a hand slightly. I'm not trying to corner you. Benedict nods politely. I know, but, she continues, you have to admit there's a disconnect sometimes. People at home hear celebrities say, we understand what you're going through, and think, no you don't. A few audience members clap. Others murmur agreement. Benedict nods again. Yes. The speed of his answer catches people off guard. Yes, he repeats. There can absolutely be disconnect. A brief pause settles over the table. But I think, he continues, there's also danger in assuming people become emotionally disqualified from caring because their circumstances changed. A host leans in. That's interesting. Benedict keeps his tone calm. If someone succeeds professionally, does that automatically mean they stop worrying, stop feeling uncertainty, stop understanding struggle? Alyssa responds quickly. No, but money changes reality. It changes many realities, Benedict agrees. The audience quiets. And it should make someone more self-aware. A few claps. But, he adds carefully, self-awareness and silence are different things. The room pauses again. One host nods slowly. Okay. Alyssa folds her hands. So where's the line? The line. For public figures, she says. When should somebody speak and when should they step back? Benedict thinks for a moment. I don't know that there's one rule. The audience laughs lightly. Another diplomatic answer. Alyssa jokes. He smiles. I warned you. Laughter breaks some tension. But Alyssa stays focused. I'm serious, though. I know. She leans slightly forward. Because sometimes it feels performative. The word lands harder. A few audience murmurs ripple through the studio. One host glances between them. You mean celebrity activism? Sometimes, Alyssa says. Or public statements. Or emotional speeches that feel disconnected from how everyday people are living. A host jumps in. I mean, audiences can smell fake from a mile away. Big audience applause. Benedict nods thoughtfully. Yes. Then pauses. I think audiences are extraordinarily intelligent. The crowd claps. No, genuinely, he says. People know when something feels insincere. Alyssa nods. Exactly. But sincerity, Benedict says carefully, isn't always measured by whether someone says precisely what we want to hear. The audience quiets. Sometimes people are clumsy. Sometimes imperfect. Sometimes nervous. Sometimes trying. Another host softly says, that's true. Alyssa tilts her head. But intention isn't impact. He nods immediately. No. That quick agreement shifts the energy again. No, Benedict repeats. Impact matters tremendously. He glances briefly toward the audience. But I think modern conversations become difficult when nobody is allowed complexity. A host raises an eyebrow. What do you mean? Well, he says, someone says one imperfect sentence, and suddenly we decide who they are forever. Scattered applause. Alyssa jumps in. But accountability matters. Yes. Again, immediate. No hesitation. Absolutely. He pauses. But accountability and permanent condemnation aren't necessarily the same thing. The audience murmurs louder now. A few claps. A few uncertain reactions. The discussion feels increasingly layered. Real. Messier than quick television arguments usually become. One host laughs lightly. I feel like everybody's trying very hard not to yell. Audience laughter. Alyssa laughs too. No yelling, she says. Yet, the room relaxes for a moment. Another host turns toward Benedict. You're very composed. Oh, internally I'm screaming, he jokes. Huge laughter. Alyssa smiles despite herself. See, now that feels honest. He laughs. Yes, thank you. Then another host shifts the conversation. Do you ever get frustrated by interviews? Audience laughter before he even answers. Benedict smiles carefully. What a dangerous question. Answer it. The audience claps. He looks amused. I suppose frustration happens when conversations stop being conversations. The room quiets slightly. What do you mean? Alyssa asks. When curiosity disappears, he says calmly. The studio settles. When someone already decided the answer before asking the question. The audience reacts instantly. Oh, a mix of laughter and audible tension. One host covers her mouth dramatically. Oh no. Alyssa laughs once, though her posture stiffens slightly. Are you saying that about me? The audience goes silent. Not fully silent, but close. The kind of hush where people instinctively lean toward the television. Benedict pauses. And for the first time, there's visible hesitation. Measured. Careful. No, he says evenly. I'm saying that happens broadly. Then he smiles slightly. But I imagine everyone in media occasionally risks that. The tension softens. Some applause. One host exhales dramatically. Oh, thank goodness. Audience laughter. Alyssa smiles but presses again. Okay, but respectfully. The audience laughs at the phrase. No, respectfully, she repeats, smiling. You are very good at answering around things. He laughs softly. I disagree. You disagree? Yes. He folds his hands calmly. I think I answer carefully. The room quiets. Careful and avoiding are not the same. A few audience members clap immediately. Alyssa watches him for a second. But careful can also mean protected. That gets a reaction. A louder one. Oh, one host whispers jokingly. We are awake this morning. Laughter spreads through the room. Benedict nods slowly. That's fair. The quick agreement surprises even Alyssa. That's fair, he repeats. Public figures are protected in many ways. Then he pauses. But vulnerability in public becomes complicated. How so? A host asks. Because audiences ask for honesty, he says. The room quiets. And then sometimes punish honesty. A few audience members clap. Others stay silent. Alyssa watches carefully. What do you mean by punish? He thinks. Say someone admits uncertainty. A beat. They're weak. Say someone changes their mind. Another beat. They're fake. Say someone makes a mistake. He pauses again. They become the mistake. Silence. Not uncomfortable. Heavy. Real. One host softly says, Wow. Another nods. That's actually true. Alyssa shifts slightly. But public trust matters too. Yes. He nods. Of course. She leans forward again. So then what responsibility do celebrities have to be authentic? Benedict exhales lightly. I think authenticity gets misunderstood. How? People imagine authenticity means constant access. The audience quiets. That someone owes complete emotional transparency. He gestures lightly. But privacy isn't dishonesty. A few audience members clap. And boundaries, he continues, aren't manipulation. The room settles again. One host glances at Alyssa. This is deeper than our morning coffee segment. Audience laughter. But Alyssa still looks unconvinced. So let me ask this directly. The audience reacts immediately. Oh boy. If someone powerful says something out of touch, she says, should people call it out harshly? Benedict pauses. A little longer this time. Then nods. Yes. The answer lands instantly. Alyssa blinks. You think so? Yes. The audience quiets again. Criticism matters. He pauses. But cruelty isn't the same as criticism. Silence. A few audience members clap softly. He looks toward Alyssa calmly. And outrage, he says evenly, can become performance too. The room freezes for a second. A host literally leans back. Audience murmurs rise. Alyssa's eyebrows lift. Oh, the tension returns. Sharper this time. Still polite. Still civil. But unmistakably real. A short silence hangs over the table after Benedict's comment. Not dramatic. Just enough for everyone to feel the shift. One host glances between them and lets out a small laugh. Okay, she says, raising both hands jokingly. I suddenly feel very aware we are live. The audience laughs, breaking some tension. Alyssa smiles too, though there's still focus in her expression. Fair, she says. That's fair. She nods once. Outrage can absolutely become performance. Benedict gives a small nod back. But criticism matters, she adds quickly. I want to be clear about that. Of course, he says. And hard conversations matter. The room settles slightly. Another host jumps in. Can I say something? I feel like everybody at home is probably yelling at their television right now because this conversation feels very familiar. Audience laughter. You mean the internet? Another host jokes. Yes, she says. Like every argument online starts exactly here. Big laughter. Benedict smiles. Without the coffee. Alyssa laughs despite herself. Speak for yourself. The audience laughs again. The atmosphere softens just enough for someone else at the table to step in. I think what's interesting, one host says, is that both of you are kind of talking about accountability, but from different directions. She gestures between them. You're saying public figures should accept criticism, she says to Benedict. He nods. And Alyssa's saying audiences get frustrated when people with influence feel disconnected. Correct, Alyssa says immediately. Yes, Benedict agrees. The host leans back. So maybe nobody disagrees as much as we think. Audience applause. Alyssa smiles. Well, that's less fun television. Laughter fills the studio. But she turns back toward Benedict. I do want to ask something honestly. He nods. Go ahead. Do celebrities ever underestimate resentment? The room quiets again. She continues carefully. I'm not saying hatred. I mean resentment. A few audience murmurs. People struggling financially, exhausted, overwhelmed, worried about jobs or bills. And then hearing somebody wealthy say, we're all in this together. Scattered applause. Do public figures misread how that lands? Benedict doesn't answer immediately. He sits back slightly, considering. Yes, he says finally. No defensiveness. No joke. Yes. The audience quiets. I think that absolutely happens. Alyssa nods slowly. Okay. But, Benedict continues, I also think anger deserves examination. A host leans forward. What do you mean? I mean frustration is real. He gestures lightly. Economic anxiety. Social division. Exhaustion. A few audience members clap. But when frustration becomes generalized contempt for entire groups of people. He pauses. We stop seeing individuals. Silence. Another host nods slowly. That's interesting. Benedict continues calmly. If someone dislikes something a public figure says, fair enough. He shrugs lightly. That's normal. But I become concerned, he adds, when disagreement turns into assumption. Alyssa looks at him. Assumption. That someone is shallow, evil, manipulative, worthless. The audience quiets noticeably. People become symbols very quickly. One host softly says, that's true. Alyssa folds her hands. But isn't celebrity built on symbolism? A few audience members react. Oh, Benedict smiles faintly. That's a very good question. The room settles again. I suppose in part, yes. He pauses. But symbols are still people. The audience claps softly. And people, he continues, contradict themselves. Another host laughs. Oh, absolutely. We grow, Benedict says. We say clumsy things. We change. Alyssa tilts her head. But public trust depends on consistency. Yes, he says. To a degree. He pauses again. But if someone can never evolve because audiences demand perfection. He shrugs lightly. That feels impossible. A few louder claps ripple through the room. One host smiles. You really think before answering. Benedict laughs quietly. I'm trying not to become tomorrow's headline. Huge laughter. Even Alyssa laughs harder this time. Too late, she says jokingly. British actor politely avoids direct answer for 40 minutes. Big laughter. Benedict laughs. That's devastating. The mood eases. For a moment. Then Alyssa shifts again. But can I push one more time? Audience laughter erupts instantly. Oh, of course, Benedict says. You keep saying complexity. Yes. But regular people don't always get the luxury of complexity. The audience quiets again. She leans forward slightly. People working 2 jobs. Parents struggling. Families stressed. A few nods in the audience. Sometimes they hear complicated conversations from privileged people and think, just answer plainly. The room stays still. Benedict listens carefully. He nods. That's fair. The quick agreement surprises the audience again. You say that a lot, Alyssa says with a smile. He laughs. Because some points are fair. Laughter. Then his expression turns more thoughtful. But plain answers can sometimes create dishonest certainty. The room quiets. What do you mean? A host asks. I think, Benedict says slowly, people often confuse confidence with truth. Silence. If someone sounds absolutely certain, we trust them. He pauses. But certainty and wisdom aren't always the same thing. Scattered applause. Sometimes the honest answer is, This is difficult. A host nods. That's real. And maybe unsatisfying, Benedict adds. But real. Alyssa watches him for a moment, then exhales lightly. You know what I think? What? I think people want sincerity. Audience applause. Even if they disagree. A louder reaction follows. Benedict nods. I agree. And I think, she says carefully, sometimes audiences don't trust carefully worded answers because they sound rehearsed. The room reacts. A little sharper this time. Benedict pauses. Then nods once. That criticism is fair. Another surprise. But, he adds calmly, carefulness can also come from responsibility. Silence. If millions of people hear something, he says, words matter. One host murmurs, that's true. You hesitate because language matters, Benedict continues. You try not to reduce complicated things into slogans. Alyssa nods slowly. So your argument is careful doesn't equal fake. Yes. Simple. Direct. The audience applauds. A host smiles. Okay, we finally got a straight answer. Big laughter. Benedict laughs too. There we are. But then Alyssa says something quieter. I'll be honest. The room settles. I actually appreciate disagreement when somebody stays calm. The audience reacts warmly. Because usually on television, she says, smiling slightly, people just start yelling. Laughter. Another host points jokingly. We still have time. Huge laughter. Alyssa shakes her head, smiling. No, seriously. She looks toward Benedict. I disagree with parts of what you're saying. He nods. But I respect the conversation. A brief pause. Benedict smiles politely. Well, disagreement is healthy. The audience claps. Provided, he says carefully, we're disagreeing with what someone actually said. The audience reacts immediately. Laughter. Applause. A couple playful gasps. Alyssa points at him. Okay, there you go again. The audience erupts laughing. You sneak it in, she says. I'm trying very hard, Benedict replies, smiling. The energy in the room feels lighter now, but sharper too, like both sides understand each other better without fully agreeing. One host glances toward the audience. You know what's funny? I think people came in expecting actor interview energy and somehow ended up in a philosophy class. Big laughter. Another host leans toward Benedict. Final serious question before we go to break. Audience murmurs. She smiles. Do you think public conversations are getting worse? The room quiets. Benedict exhales slowly. And for the first time all segment, he looks genuinely reflective before answering. Benedict takes a breath before answering. Not a dramatic pause. Not theatrical. Just thoughtful. I think, he says slowly, public conversations are getting louder. The studio quiets. And louder isn't always worse, he adds. A host nods. Okay, but faster, Benedict continues. Faster can be difficult. Alyssa watches closely. How? Because speed rewards reaction. The audience stays quiet. Immediate certainty. Immediate outrage. Immediate judgment. He folds his hands loosely. And meaningful conversations often require patience. A few audience members clap softly. One host leans forward. You think we don't listen anymore? Benedict smiles faintly. No, I think people desperately want to listen. That lands differently. The room settles. I think people are exhausted, he says carefully. And frightened sometimes. Frustrated. Defensive. A few audience murmurs rise. And when people feel unheard, he continues, they stop entering conversations to understand and start entering them to win. Scattered applause. Alyssa nods slightly. That part one agree with. The audience reacts warmly. One host laughs. Oh wow, growth. Laughter spreads through the room. Alyssa smiles. No, seriously. She glances toward Benedict. I still think public figures deserve tough questions. Absolutely, he says immediately. And criticism. Yes. But, Alyssa adds, I also think people shut down too quickly when somebody disagrees respectfully. The audience claps. Another host points between them. Wait, are we resolving television? Huge laughter. No, Benedict says dryly. That would be far too ambitious. Big audience laughter. Even Alyssa laughs harder than before. You know, she says, still smiling. I came into this thinking I was going to get a very polished celebrity interview. Audience laughter. And somehow I got politely challenged for 40 minutes. Louder laughter. Benedict grins. In my defense, I feel politely challenged as well. A host shakes her head jokingly. This has become weirdly civilized. The audience laughs. One host turns toward Alyssa. Can I ask you something? Oh boy. No, seriously, the host says. Did you feel like he dodged? Audience reaction. The crowd perks up again. Alyssa thinks for a second. Yes and no. The audience laughs immediately. Oh, now who's nuanced? A host jokes. Big laughter. Alyssa points across the table. See? He infected me. More laughter. No, Alyssa says, settling back. I think sometimes careful answers frustrate people because viewers want directness. She glances toward Benedict. But I also think you answered honestly. The audience applauds. And, she adds, I respect staying calm. Benedict nods. Well, shouting rarely improves understanding. One host jokingly gasps. Someone tell television. Huge laughter. The mood feels noticeably lighter now. The tension hasn't disappeared, but it feels transformed. Less confrontation. More mutual challenge. Another host turns to Benedict. So what's one thing people misunderstand about disagreement? He thinks for a second. That disagreement isn't rejection. The audience quiets again. You can disagree with someone strongly, he says, and still respect their intelligence. A few audience members clap. You can criticize ideas, he continues, without assuming bad faith. Alyssa nods slightly. That's fair. And, Benedict says with a faint smile, sometimes the most useful conversations are uncomfortable. Audience applause rises louder this time. One host points toward the audience. They're into philosopher Benedict this morning. Laughter. Another host glances at the clock. We are almost out of time. Audience groans jokingly. No, I know, she says dramatically. Everybody wanted another hour of respectful disagreement. The crowd laughs. Alyssa smiles. Which never trends online, by the way. That gets a big reaction. Oh, it absolutely doesn't, another host laughs. One host turns toward Benedict. Before we wrap, what's something you'd want people watching to remember? The room quiets one last time. Benedict pauses. Not carefully this time. Just sincerely. I suppose. He smiles faintly. That people are more complicated than headlines. Silence. Then applause. Public figures. He gestures lightly. Hosts. A small glance across the table. Actors. Alyssa smiles. Viewers. The audience claps louder. We all say imperfect things. He shrugs slightly. And maybe conversations improve when curiosity survives disagreement. A louder wave of applause rolls through the studio. A host smiles. That is annoyingly reasonable. Huge laughter. Alyssa laughs too. I hate how reasonable this ended. The audience erupts. Benedict smiles. I'll try harder next time. Big applause. The segment wraps with smiles, a few lingering laughs, and one last exchange of eye contact across the table that feels less tense than before. As the cameras begin to widen and the show moves toward commercial, audience members can still be heard reacting. That was actually good. They disagreed without yelling. You don't see that anymore. A few people clap again as Benedict stands and shakes hands across the panel. Alyssa says something off mic that makes him laugh. Another host jokingly points between them. Look at this, peace talks. More laughter. After the segment airs, clips begin circulating online almost immediately. Some viewers praise Alyssa for asking direct questions. Others say Benedict stayed calm under pressure. Many focus on the moment when he quietly said, outrage can become performance too, while others replay his line about answering the question designed to become a headline. Comment sections split quickly. Some viewers argue he was too diplomatic. Others call the conversation refreshing precisely because nobody shouted. Posts begin appearing across social platforms with reactions like, finally a disagreement that sounded human. Why did this feel smarter than most cable arguments? Alyssa actually pushed back respectfully. Benedict somehow disagreed without sounding angry. Others debate who won the conversation, while plenty of viewers argue that nobody needed to win. The clip trends for something unexpected. A tense discussion that slowly became thoughtful. Later, discussion continues online about whether audiences reward outrage too much and whether public figures are unfairly expected to explain complicated issues in simple sound bites. Entertainment commentators revisit the segment, debating whether this kind of slower, grounded disagreement still works on daytime television. Backstage, according to people discussing the moment afterward, the atmosphere reportedly feels far less tense than viewers imagined. Benedict stops briefly to thank the crew. Alyssa exchanges another quick laugh with him before heading toward the next segment prep. No dramatic exit. No shouting. No backstage explosion. Just two people who disagreed publicly, challenged each other, and moved on professionally. And maybe that becomes the part audiences remember most. What did you think about this conversation? Was Benedict right to stay measured, or should Alyssa have pushed even harder? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show stories.